I likely earned the title of the most despised neighbor in the annals of suburbia when I shut off the water supply to 342 residences during a sweltering Texas summer. But in my defense, they had constructed a pipeline across my property without my consent. So now I find myself observing the HOA president, Cynthia, with her expensive $300 highlights positioned at my front door. Her face, turning the color of a tomato, is a mask of desperation as she pleads with me to restore the water. I simply offer a smile and take a slow sip of my iced tea. Believe me, the full story is worth waiting for, as it takes turns more astonishing than you could ever predict. Becoming a rancher was never my intention. My existence was deeply rooted in Silicon Valley, where I had dedicated the past 10 years to developing software that assisted companies in managing their shipping logistics. While not a glamorous profession, it provided a comfortable living and kept my intellect engaged. Everything shifted the day I received the call concerning my dad. A heart attack, they informed me, had been sudden. By the moment I arrived back in Texas, he had already passed away. The funeral proceedings are a hazy memory of faces I hardly knew and anecdotes about a man I came to realize I had not spent nearly enough time with during his final years. As the sole male heir, I inherited the Morgan family ranch, a 15-acre expanse of Texas countryside that had belonged to our family for 3 generations. By Texan measures, it was not a vast property, but it was our own. Dad had toiled on that land until his last day, the calluses on his hands bearing witness to a man who saw honest labor as its own fulfillment. My mother, Peggy, was adamant that she could oversee the ranch on her own. Yet at 68, her formidable spirit was no match for the physical toll. "Eli," she told me one evening while we sat on the porch, watching the setting sun paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, "your father always said this land would be waiting for you when you were ready to come home." I surveyed the rolling hills, the ancient oak trees, and the small creek that bisected the property. Something shifted within me. It was possible that this was precisely the change I needed, a break from the relentless cycle of deadlines and digital screens. Thus, I decided to take a sabbatical from my technology job and dedicate some time to determining the future of the ranch. Little did I suspect that this choice would drag me into a neighborhood conflict I had never wanted. The problems began precisely 2 weeks after I had moved in. An immaculate white envelope bearing an embossed logo showed up in our mailbox. It was an invitation to a welcome event for new neighbors at the Clear Hollow Ridge Community Center. Clear Hollow Ridge was the name of the high-end housing development that had materialized adjacent to our land approximately 5 years prior. Dad had spoken of them during our phone conversations, typically with a grunt of disdain. "Those people from the city build their grand houses and then lament the smell of honest country," he had remarked. I thought about disregarding the invitation, but Mom believed it would be beneficial for me to get to know the neighbors. "Your father was obstinate about them," she conceded. "Perhaps you can make a fresh start." I reluctantly consented to go. I should have trusted my gut. The community center for Clear Hollow Ridge was a sleek, contemporary structure featuring floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of their artificial lake, a minor yet tasteful water feature that served as the development centerpiece. Upon entering, dressed in my best jeans and a button-down shirt, I felt instantly out of place amidst the cocktail dresses and polished grins. A tall woman with flawlessly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that failed to reach her eyes came toward me. "You must be Eli Morgan," she stated, offering a hand that was adorned with a diamond ring that glittered in the light. "I'm Cynthia Ton, president of the Clear Hollow Ridge Homeowners Association. We are so delighted you could make it." Her tone had the rehearsed cordiality of someone skilled at appearing welcoming while simultaneously assessing you. Positioned slightly behind her was an older gentleman with silver hair and keen eyes, whom she introduced as Richard Coleman, the HOA's vice president and a retired lawyer. Our brief exchange of courtesies lasted no more than 7 minutes before Cynthia led me to a secluded corner that offered a stunning view of the grounds. "Mr. Morgan, may I call you Eli? We were deeply sorry to learn of your father's passing. He was quite a character." The inflection she used on the word character made it evident it was not intended as a compliment. "I'll be direct. Your family's ranch, while certainly charming, has become a source of some concern for our residents." She made a vague gesture toward the large houses visible past the trees that separated our properties. "Property values, you see. We have received multiple complaints regarding the rustic aesthetic." Richard gave a solemn nod beside her. "We would like to present you with an offer to buy the land. Clear Hollow is planning to expand its recreational amenities, and your property would be ideal." She stated a price that was roughly 40% under its market value, then smiled as though she had just granted me a tremendous favor. I took a moment, blinking deliberately and sipping my sparkling water to gain some time. Miss Laton, Cynthia, please. Cynthia, I value your interest, but I have no intention of selling. The ranch has belonged to my family for generations, and I plan to maintain that legacy. Her smile became almost imperceptibly taut. I can appreciate sentimentality, Eli. I truly can. But let's be realistic. You're a person from the tech world, not a rancher. What use do you have for all that land? The offer is quite generous, especially given the property's current condition. A surge of anger flashed through me, but I maintained a calm tone. Once again, I appreciate the interest, but the answer remains no. Now, if you would be so kind as to excuse me, I need to head home. My mother is waiting for me. As I began to walk away, Cynthia rested a manicured hand on my arm. Consider it, Eli. Being neighbors can be a simple or a difficult process. I would truly hate for us to begin on a sour note. The threat was thinly disguised but clear. During the drive back, I replayed the exchange in my mind. What had my father been contending with for all these years? When I recounted the meeting to my mother, she let out a heavy sigh. They've been pressuring your father to sell for a long time. It began cordially, then became less so. Last summer, they issued him 15 different violation notices for code breaches. Even though we aren't under their authority, your father saved everyone. He said he might have a use for them one day. She vanished into his office and came back with a folder filled with official-looking documents, each one outlining alleged infractions from overgrown foliage to the improper storage of equipment. As I perused the letters, my jaw clenched. This is nothing but harassment, I grumbled. Mom nodded in agreement. Your father refused to be intimidated. I suppose now they imagine they'll have more success with you. She regarded me with a blend of apprehension and pride. What are your plans? I shut the folder, my mind already exploring various possibilities. First, I believe I should contact an old friend. My former classmate from UT Austin, Sarah Martinez, was now one of the most esteemed real estate lawyers in the county. She examined the violation notices over coffee at a diner in town. This is a classic case of intimidation, she declared, adjusting her glasses on her nose. They possess absolutely no jurisdiction over your land. You are not located within their HOA's borders, nor are you bound by their rules. These notices are legally without merit. She tapped the pile of documents. That being said, never underestimate HOAs. They have the ability to make life exceedingly difficult when they choose. She paused. What are your exact intentions for the ranch, Eli? I considered her question for a moment before I replied. To be honest, I'm not completely certain yet, but I do know that I won't sell it to them for a low-ball offer just so they can construct another golf course. Dad cherished that land. It merits a better fate. Sarah nodded. In that case, let's ensure you're safeguarded. Keep a record of everything. Every conversation, every letter, and let's have your property surveyed once more to confirm the boundaries. As we were leaving, Sarah gave my arm a squeeze. And Eli, inspect your fences frequently. It's remarkable how often property lines are misunderstood in these kinds of disputes. I would soon discover just how prescient her advice had been. A period of relative calm followed for the next few weeks. I settled into a routine of ranch chores, mending fences, clearing away brush, and mastering the daily duties that had defined my father's existence. The work was physical, draining, and strangely fulfilling. Then, on a Tuesday morning, as I was inspecting the southern fence line that abutted Clear Hollow, I saw something that brought me to a halt. A portion of our land had been disturbed, with fresh dirt that had been recently turned over. Tracing the path, I found a new pipeline running across our land. It was buried just beneath the ground, but was noticeable where the soil had not completely settled. The pipeline extended from the creek on our property directly toward Clear Hollow. Without delay, I contacted Sarah, who came within the hour, accompanied by a county surveyor. This is egregiously illegal, she stated, taking pictures of the pipeline from various perspectives. They have trespassed on your property and installed infrastructure without any permission or permits. The surveyor verified that the pipeline was well inside our property lines. What is its purpose? I inquired, kneeling down to look at where it passed under our fence. My suspicion is water, Sarah answered. The creek on your property flows into the aquifer that serves this entire region. Clear Hollow likely tapped into it for their ornate lake and irrigation needs. Texas water rights are intricate, but one point is undeniably clear. They cannot simply lay a pipeline through your property without easements, approvals, and and fair payment. Later that day, I went to the Clear Hollow Community Center and asked for an immediate meeting with Cynthia. After a period of being made to wait in the reception area, I was at last shown into her office. "Eli, have you reevaluated our offer?" she inquired. I placed the photographs of the pipeline on her desk without speaking. Her posture became slightly more rigid. "What is this meant to be?" she asked, her voice deliberately neutral. "It's a pipeline that your HOA has installed on my property without authorization," I responded calmly. "I expect it to be removed at once, or I will press charges for trespassing." Cynthia's smile grew cold. "That is a grave allegation. We possess all the necessary easements for our water infrastructure. If there is some confusion regarding property lines, I am confident we can resolve it." "There is no confusion," I retorted, sliding the survey report across to her. "The pipeline is 27 feet inside my property line." Cynthia looked at the report. "These situations are complex, Mr. Morgan. Our development holds certain water access rights that existed before your ownership. If you choose to handle this aggressively, you will find yourself entangled in lengthy legal disputes that could go on for years." It was the second threat she had leveled at me, this one more direct. I rose to my feet. "You have 48 hours to show proof of any easement or agreement, or I will expect to see crews taking out that pipeline." As I started to leave, Cynthia called out to me. "You are making a mistake, Eli. Your father eventually came to understand how things operate around here. You will too." As I was leaving, a man approached me in the parking lot. "Mr. Morgan, my name is Mike Hansen. I'm a resident of Clear Hollow." He looked around with a nervous air. "I can't be seen speaking with you, but you should be aware that they've been charging us additional HOA fees for a water system enhancement for the last year, $300 per quarter for each household. They claimed it was to secure water autonomy for our community." He gave me a Clear Hollow newsletter that outlined the special assessment. A number of us have been raising questions about where all that money is going. Nobody is providing clear answers. Before I could reply, he was heading away. "I was never here." "Understood." The investigation led by Sarah confirmed that there were no records of any easement, agreement, or permit for the pipeline. Clear Hollow had simply appropriated what they desired, relying on either my father's unawareness or his lack of means to resist. And now they were levying substantial fees on residents under what could be considered false pretenses. "This is no longer just about trespassing," Sarah clarified. "If they are misrepresenting the purpose of those fees, it could constitute fraud." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the information. "So, what is our next step?" Sarah's face was resolute. "Document everything. Install cameras along your property line, and let's determine precisely what they are taking from you, specifically, the amount of water and its value. Water rights are a significant issue in Texas, Eli. If they are tapping into your creek for their whole development, that could be incredibly valuable." When I detailed our discoveries to my mom that evening, she shook her head with sadness. "Your father had a feeling something like this was happening. Last summer, during the drought, he observed that the creek's water level was lower than it should have been. He was intending to investigate it before her voice faded. I took her hand. "Don't be concerned, Mom. We will take care of this." What I didn't voice was how. I was starting to devise a plan that would teach Clear Hollow Ridge, and Cynthia Alton in particular, a lesson they would not easily forget. The following day, we installed the cameras, high-resolution security cameras camouflaged as birdhouses along our property line. 3 days later, they recorded footage of a crew, headed by Brad Thompson, Clear Hollow's facilities manager, entering our property at 2 in the morning. They enlarged the connection point at the creek, putting in what looked like a more powerful pumping system. The most conclusive moment occurred when Brad took out his phone and stated, "Yes, Miss Alton, we are upgrading it at this moment. It should boost capacity by 30%. This was direct proof of Cynthia's participation. I presented the footage to Sarah, who proceeded to file for an injunction. "This is precisely what we were hoping for," she remarked. Clear evidence of ongoing trespassing even after they were explicitly notified. However, the legal process was sluggish, and Cynthia had evidently shifted to a different strategy. While we awaited a court date, rumors started to circulate throughout the area. Neighbors who had known my family for many years began to ask peculiar questions. "Is there any truth to the rumor that you're going to set up a Bitcoin mining facility?" Mrs. Finley inquired at the supermarket. The local barber brought up, "The rumor is that you're selling to a commercial developer who intends to construct a waste treatment plant." The origin of these rumors was not difficult to pinpoint. Next came the official harassment. A county inspector by the name of Thomas Green appeared without notice, referencing anonymous complaints about unpermitted construction. He discovered nothing, naturally, but the intent was clear. Cynthia had influence that extended beyond Clear Hollow. I got a certified letter summoning me to a meeting with the Clear Hollow HOA board to discuss the environmental effects of the Morgan property. It was a setup aimed at putting me in a defensive position on their turf, but I chose to go regardless. Accompanied by Sarah and with a recording device in my pocket, the meeting was the exact ambush we had foreseen. Cynthia had filled the room with agitated homeowners and displayed a slideshow of deliberately chosen pictures of our ranch that made it appear neglected. As you can observe, she proclaimed, the present state of the property poses potential fire risks, serves as a breeding ground for pests, and contributes to a general decline in our community's aesthetic. A ripple of assent went through the crowd. Then she addressed me with feigned concern. "Mr. Morgan, maybe you could enlighten us on your plans to rectify these problems." Her stress on the word plans revealed she was trying to get information about my intentions for the property. I stood up, feeling the weight of dozens of wary gazes. "I appreciate your concern," I started calmly. "I would be willing to talk about valid community matters. However, I am more keen to discuss the illegal pipeline your HOA has placed on my property, the water you are taking without authorization, and the $300 per quarter you are billing residents for something you are, in fact, stealing." The room fell into a deathly quiet. Cynthia's smile became rigid, and Richard swiftly moved to the microphone. "That is a very serious charge, Mr. Morgan. Perhaps this is something we should discuss in private. I have video evidence," I cut in, "of your facility's manager expanding the unauthorized pipeline 3 nights ago, on a call where he explicitly confirmed Mistleton's directives. I would be glad to show it to everyone present." The murmuring in the room changed in character as homeowners began to look at each other. This was clearly not what they had been informed about regarding the water system upgrade they were funding. Chaos erupted at the meeting. Cynthia abruptly moved to adjourn, but several homeowners stood in front of the exits, insisting on answers about the water fees. Sarah and I managed to leave amidst the turmoil. Our mission was a success. We had sown seeds of doubt among the HOA members. I hadn't foreseen how rapidly Cynthia would intensify her actions in reaction to being uncovered. The following morning, we found our tractor's engine had been sabotaged overnight. The cameras showed that men in hooded sweatshirts had trespassed and poured a substance into the fuel tank. That very day, our mailbox was demolished, and by that evening, the front of our house had been vandalized with spray paint. The words "Sell your land," hillbilly scrawled in aggressive red letters. My mother's face hardened when she saw it. "Your father constructed this house with his own 2 hands," she said in a low voice. "No pretentious real estate agent with inflated self-importance is going to force us out." I contacted Sheriff Miller, who filed a report but appeared hesitant to take further action. "Look, Eli, I can't start pointing fingers at the Clear Hollow residents without proof." His gaze didn't quite connect with mine. Later, Mike Hansen called from a private number to clarify. Miller's department was a recipient of generous contributions from the Clear Hollow Community Fund. Cynthia had made it clear to him who was responsible for his funding. My sister, Jennifer, an investigative journalist, arrived from Austin. "You've been on the defensive, Eli? It's time to switch to an offensive strategy." She started to investigate Cynthia's background and the HOA's financial dealings. Her findings were revealing. Prior to her role as HOA president, Cynthia had been associated with 2 other housing developments that had encountered problems with water access. In both instances, neighboring properties had strangely been sold for less than their market value after being subjected to vandalism and issues with code enforcement. The crucial evidence emerged when Jennifer found a purported agreement between Clear Hollow Ridge and the Morgan Ranch for water access rights, dated 2 years prior and featuring what seemed to be my father's signature. "This is a fake," I declared at once. "Dad would have never consented to this." Sarah affirmed that the document was extremely dubious. The signature did not perfectly align with Dad's on other legal documents. "They must have concocted this as a contingency plan when they saw you were putting up a fight," Jennifer speculated. We had now accumulated evidence not only of trespassing and water theft, but also of potential forgery and fraud. Our inquiry took an unexpected turn when Jennifer discovered an announcement in the county's water management bulletin. The source of our creek, The spring that supplied the water to our property was slated for sale. The water district was set to auction the rights within 30 days. Whoever controls the source dictates the flow, Sarah clarified. If Clear Hollow acquires those rights, they could legally sever your access completely or compel you to pay them for water. Jennifer leaned in, her eyes shining. Then let's purchase it before they do. I glanced at Mom, who gave a resolute nod. Go for it, she stated. Your father would have said the same. The trap was prepared. If Cynthia was determined to play dirty, I was on the verge of demonstrating what truly murky waters looked like. Acquiring the water rights demanded careful strategy. If Cynthia learned of our intentions, she would surely attempt to win the bid against us. Sarah put me in touch with Dave Wilson, the chairman of the local water management board, who had clashed with Cynthia on multiple occasions. That woman, he remarked with a frown, has been attempting to corner the market on water access for that development since they first started construction. She's always trying to charm the board members, as if we can't see right through her. Dave was not able to assist us directly, but he did clarify the mechanics of the bidding process, which turned out to be priceless information. We established an LLC, registered at Sarah's office address to hide my identity, and placed our bid for the headwaters. The initial price was considerable, $45,000 for a small piece of land that most would overlook. However, given that it governed the water supply to a high-end development with homes worth hundreds of millions of dollars, it was a steal. Additionally, Sarah connected me with Olivia Parker, an environmental lawyer who specialized in water rights. Texas water law operates on the principle of prior appropriation, she clarified. Basically, the first to use the water has the first right to it. By obtaining the headwaters, you will hold primary rights to that water. They won't be able to just take it any longer. They will be forced to come to an agreement with you. The deal was completed smoothly. We were the sole bidders, which indicated that Cynthia had not grasped the importance of the sale announcement. I was now the gratified owner of a stony hillside spring that most would deem to be of no value, but which was a crucial move in our ongoing conflict. We maintained secrecy about the purchase, with the ownership filed under the LLC's name. According to Dave, word of the sale had gotten to Clear Hollow and had caused a significant commotion when they found out someone had bought the headwaters, although they were still unaware of the buyer's identity. Cynthia came into my office in a fury, wanting to know who had bought it. He recounted with a smile. She claimed it was rightfully a component of their water management strategy. I informed her that the public records would be made available in good time. The response from Cynthia upon losing the headwaters was both swift and malicious. My mother was confronted in the supermarket by residents of Clear Hollow who had been given false information. They accused me of being a grasping old woman for refusing to sell for the betterment of the community, she told me, her hands trembling slightly. Then, Brad Thompson and his crew were recorded by our security cameras trying to push the pipeline deeper into our property in the middle of the day. When I challenged them, Brad became hostile. You have no idea who you're dealing with, tech boy, he snarled. Miss Sultan has influential connections. You will regret creating adversaries here. The breaking point was reached when Cynthia convened an emergency HOA meeting and officially labeled my family as hostile forces that endangered the community's well-being. The records of the meeting, which were passed on to us by Mike Hansen, showed that she had established a community defense fund, which necessitated another special charge of $500 per household to safeguard Clear Hollow's water supply. She was essentially intensifying her efforts, extracting even more funds from the residents while depicting us as the antagonists. We also got a notification that Clear Hollow was starting eminent domain proceedings against our property for the pipeline's path, citing the need for essential public utility access as their reason. They can't legally do this, Sarah reassured me. HOAs lack the power of eminent domain. This is a tactic to intimidate, but it indicates they are growing desperate. Jennifer had been recording everything, creating what she termed the court of public opinion case. She had compiled in-depth videos that showed the unlawful pipeline, the environmental harm it was inflicting, and conversations with specialists who explained the legal infractions involved. When the moment is opportune, she assured me, we will leak these to the press. Cynthia will be blindsided. The choice was forced upon us following a call from Dave Wilson, who alerted us that Clear Hollow had submitted emergency permits to safeguard existing water infrastructure on our land. They're asserting grandfathered access rights based on that fraudulent agreement, he clarified. They must be truly at their wits' end. Within a matter of hours, our cameras recorded Brad Thompson and a team cutting through our fence and causing damage to a section of the property in order to extend the pipeline. When I went to confront them, Sheriff Miller was already present, having apparently been summoned by Cynthia. However, he remained a passive observer, stating that it was a civil matter in which he could not get involved. I observed with rage as Brad offered a smirk over the sheriff's shoulder. "This is private land," I stated, my voice strained. "You are trespassing and ruining my fence." "That is a criminal offense, Sheriff." Miller shuffled his feet uneasily. "Now, Eli, it appears there's some confusion with the paperwork here. Clear Hollow has documents that indicate they have the right of access until a judge resolves the matter. Fraudulent documents. I cut in, and you're well aware of it." The sheriff avoided making eye contact. As they carried on with their work, I went back to the house, a sense of cold resolve taking hold of me. If the legal system was not going to safeguard us, we would have to resort to taking action ourselves. The time had come to deploy our ultimate deterrent. "We are now the owners of the headwaters," I pointed out to Sarah and Jennifer during our urgent planning meeting. "What are our legal options with that?" Olivia detailed our choices. "As the proprietor of the source, you possess primary water rights. You have the authority to control the flow as required for sensible management and conservation. You are not permitted to cut off the water supply out of spite. However, you are absolutely within your rights to set up monitoring devices, flow regulators, and perform system upkeep that could momentarily limit the flow, especially if you are worried that unapproved use downstream is resulting in environmental damage." I turned to my mother, who had been listening in silence. "What are your thoughts?" She squared her shoulders. "I believe your father would say it's time to let them see what happens when you cross a Morgan." The course of action was decided. They desired water. Very well. Let's find out who will be the first to go thirsty. The control valve's installation at the headwaters was a 2-day process of meticulous work. I engaged a qualified water systems engineer who set up a valve that could be operated from a distance, allowing for the regulation or complete stoppage of the water flow from the spring into the creek. All actions were carried out lawfully. We filed for the necessary permits for water flow management infrastructure, adhered to the proper environmental safety measures, and gave official notification to the County Water Authority regarding essential maintenance and supervision of private water assets. The cost was $26,000, but I viewed it as a worthwhile expenditure for justice. Olivia recommended that I extensively document the current unauthorized pipeline before I made any changes to the water flow. "Establish a clear record showing that you made an effort to settle this peacefully," she stressed. Acting on her advice, I dispatched a formal letter to the Clear Hollow HOA board, outlining the details of the illegal pipeline, the evidence of water theft, and our ownership of the headwaters. The letter demanded the prompt removal of all unauthorized structures and suggested a meeting to talk about a possible legitimate water access contract at standard market prices. I allowed them 72 hours to reply before we would take all necessary measures. The reply from Cynthia arrived as a cease and desist letter from Gregory Hoffman, Clear Hollow's legal counsel, asserting that we were obstructing established community water access and threatening to file counterclaims. The letter made reference to the fraudulent agreement and contained subtle warnings about severe legal repercussions. Sarah and Olivia corroborated my suspicion. It was all a bluff with scant legal backing. The 72-hour time limit expired with no meaningful reply. The time had come. On a scorching Tuesday morning in the middle of July, with the temperature predicted to reach 103 degrees, I activated the remote control that engaged the valve. The result was not instantaneous. Clear Hollow possessed some water in reserve, but by the middle of the afternoon, the consequences were starting to show. The decorative fountains at the community's entrance were the first to cease functioning. By nightfall, the sprinkler systems had stopped working, leaving the perfectly tended lawns at the mercy of the intense heat. And by the next morning, the water pressure in the homes had decreased significantly, with some residences losing their water supply altogether. Chaos gripped the community. By midday on the second day, local news crews had started to gather outside the gates of Clear Hollow. Cynthia gave a fervent interview in which she portrayed their community as the targets of water terrorism by a malevolent neighbor who was obstructing progress. She was careful not to bring up the illegal pipeline or the fact that they had been purloining water for a number of years. Families are in distress, she proclaimed in a dramatic tone. Children are unable to take baths. Elderly residents are facing risks in this heat. All of this is happening because one individual wants to bully our community. Her portrayal was persuasive, and the initial reports were mostly in Clear Hollow's favor. Jennifer's counterattack began that very evening. She provided her carefully compiled video evidence to chosen news organizations, including time-stamped recordings of the illegal pipeline's construction, statements from experts on water rights, and copies of the falsified documents. This is not about a single individual controlling the water supply, she informed the press. This is about a corrupt HOA that is stealing resources, cheating homeowners, and damaging private property, and then pretending to be the victim when they are discovered. The story started to change as more objective reporting came out, which brought up inquiries about Clear Hollow's water system and the questionable special assessments. The third day became the climax when a furious group of Clear Hollow residents gathered at our front gate, with Cynthia at their head. "Restore our water, Morgan," she yelled through a megaphone. "You have no right to take an entire community hostage." The crowd behind her was split. Some were irate, while others looked uneasy, clearly having seen the recent news reports and beginning to doubt their HOA's conduct. Sheriff Miller showed up, this time expressing concern for public order. I faced them at the gate, with Jennifer capturing everything on camera from our porch. "This is private land," I declared calmly. "You are trespassing, and your actions amount to harassment." Cynthia came forward, her face red with anger. "You are ruining our community. People will not forget who deprived them of water during a heat wave." I kept my cool, conscious of the cameras. "I am merely overseeing water resources on property that I own legally, Ms. Latton. The very same water that your HOA has been pilfering through an unlawful pipeline that you had installed without authorization. Have you informed your neighbors that they have been funding special assessments for purloined water? Or about the fraudulent document bearing my deceased father's signature that you fabricated?" A murmur spread through the crowd as neighbors looked at one another. Mike Hansen came forward. "Is that correct, Cynthia? Have we been funding the theft of water?" Others then started to ask about the special assessments. The confrontation had backfired in a spectacular way. Rather than rallying the community to oppose me, it had shifted the focus to Cynthia's behavior. Sheriff Miller, sensing the changing atmosphere, at last intervened. "All right, everyone. This is a civil dispute that must be handled correctly through the legal system. Let's all go our separate ways before this turns into a public nuisance." As the crowd began to disperse, Miller came up to me in private. "The mayor's office has been in touch. They wish to have a meeting with both sides tomorrow to settle this matter. 9 a.m. at City Hall." That evening, Richard Coleman made an unexpected call to me. "Morgan, this has proceeded far enough. You've established your position." His tone was missing its usual self-assurance. "Restore the water supply as a gesture of goodwill, and we can work out a fair resolution." I was not convinced. The opportunity for fair negotiations passed when you put in an illegal pipeline, fake documents, and damaged my property. "I will see you at City Hall in the morning." After I ended the call, I conferred with Sarah and Olivia regarding our strategy for the negotiation. As a small act of goodwill, I remotely turned the valve to permit a 6-hour flow of water overnight, which was sufficient for the residents to fill their bathtubs and other containers. This was not an act of kindness, it was a calculated move. I intended to make it perfectly clear that I was in complete command of the situation. The following morning, Jennifer presented the online reaction to her videos. They had become a viral sensation overnight, with thousands of people sharing the footage of the unlawful pipeline and Cynthia's confrontation at our gate. The tide of public opinion had turned decisively in our favor. Bolstered by public support, a strong legal position, and the actual ability to control the water supply, we made our way to City Hall for what was set to be the most crucial negotiation of my unforeseen new career as a rancher and defender of water rights. The setting was City Hall, a grand limestone structure in the heart of the town. Mayor Robert Hayes, a seasoned politician with silver hair, had made arrangements for us to convene in the council chambers, a formal environment that highlighted the gravity of the matter. His aide, Andrea Wells, led us to our places on one side of a substantial oak table. Shortly after, Cynthia came in with Richard Coleman and Gregory Hoffman, Clear Hollow's legal counsel. Mayor Hayes assumed his position at the head of the table, with 2 city lawyers and Dave Wilson from the Water Management Board on either side. "Let's proceed directly to the matter at hand," Mayor Hayes stated, his deep voice resonating in the chamber. "We are faced with a community of more than 300 households lacking a dependable water supply during a heat wave, accusations of property trespassing and unapproved water use, and enough negative media coverage to tarnish our city's image for the foreseeable future. He addressed me first. Mr. Morgan, as I gather, you are currently in control of the water source and have limited the supply to Clear Hollow Ridge. Is this accurate? All eyes were on me as Sarah gave a slight nod. That is accurate, Mayor, I answered. After finding out that Clear Hollow had put in an illegal pipeline on my land without consent, and after several efforts to settle the issue were either disregarded or met with aggression, I legally acquired the headwaters that supply the creek on my property. As the proprietor of that water source, I have temporarily limited the flow while I work to resolve the issue of the unapproved infrastructure on my land. Mayor Hayes gave a thoughtful nod before turning his attention to Cynthia. Cynthia, Clear Hollow asserts it has proper authorization for its water access. Are you able to furnish any documentation? Cynthia sat up straighter, projecting an air of confidence. Certainly, Mayor. Clear Hollow has had water access agreements with the Morgan property for a number of years. She gestured to Hoffman, who brought out the forged agreement. This document, which was signed by Eli's father 2 years ago, provides us with an easement for water infrastructure. I felt myself tense up, but Sarah put a restraining hand on my arm. Hoffman carried on in a smooth manner. Furthermore, the water in question provides for over 300 families, which elevates this to a matter of public utility. Mr. Morgan's actions are an unlawful disruption of vital services. Mayor Hayes studied the document with care before handing it to his legal advisors. And what of these claims of property damage and harassment that are mentioned in Mr. Morgan's records? Cynthia's smile became taut. Those are entirely overstated, Mayor. We have conducted routine upkeep in the vicinity of our infrastructure. If there has been any confusion regarding the property lines, we are more than willing to resolve that as part of a larger agreement. The blatant falsehood made my anger surge. However, my years of experience in tech negotiations had taught me the importance of controlling my emotions. Sarah took the initiative, her voice composed yet firm. Mayor Hayes, we possess video proof of Clear Hollow personnel trespassing on the Morgan property as recently as the previous week, where they were observed cutting fences and enlarging the unauthorized pipeline. We also have records of systematic harassment, which includes the vandalism of property. The discussion proceeded in this manner for close to an hour. Just as it appeared we had reached a stalemate, the doors to the chamber swung open and Lisa Thompson walked in. I must apologize for the interruption, Mayor, but as a resident of Clear Hollow, I am of the opinion that my neighbors and I are entitled to be heard in these talks. Behind her were at least a dozen other residents. We have gathered signatures from 120 households that call for financial openness from our HOA board concerning the water access charges we have been making, and we are also requesting an independent inquiry into Ms. Ilton's leadership. The room descended into chaos as Cynthia jumped to her feet, accusing Lisa of fracturing community solidarity in a time of emergency. Richard tried to step in, implying that the residents were not aware of the intricate legal details. Mayor Hayes at last brought back order by repeatedly striking his gavel. That's enough, Miss Thompson. While I value the participation of citizens, this meeting was set up to find an immediate solution to the water shortage. Your worries about the management of the HOA are a separate matter. Lisa held her position. With all due respect, Mayor, the two are intrinsically linked. We have been paying hundreds of dollars in extra fees for a water system that, it seems, involves taking from a neighboring property. That is fraud, and it has a direct bearing on any potential settlement. As Hayes tried to bring the meeting back on track, Sarah passed me a note that had been given to her by Mike Hansen. The note contained a startling revelation: financial documents that showed Cynthia had redirected more than $200,000 from the HOA's water infrastructure fund over a period of 3 years, using the money for her own home improvements and extravagant holidays. This was not merely a case of poor management or water theft. It was blatant embezzlement. I handed the note to Sarah, who then asked for a short break, which Hayes allowed. During the break, our group gathered with Mike and Lisa in an adjacent room. My background is in accounting, Mike whispered. Following your confrontation at the HOA meeting, I began to examine our financial statements. What I've discovered is only the beginning. She has been taking a cut from every special assessment for years, Lisa continued. And Brad Thompson came to me last night, clearly frightened. He confessed that Cynthia had instructed him to forge Mr. Morgan's father's signature on the water agreement. Sarah's face showed an expression of barely suppressed elation. This alters the entire situation. We must have Brad's statement officially recorded. Upon resuming the meeting, Sarah calmly laid out the new evidence, asking that the police department launch an inquiry into possible fraud and forgery. Cynthia's composure finally shattered completely. This is preposterous. A desperate attempt at a smear campaign by a resentful neighbor and dissatisfied residents. Richard, do something. But Richard Coleman was now intently focused on the documents in front of him, pointedly not looking at her. Mayor Hayes directed his team to get in touch with the district attorney's office right away. In light of these grave charges, I think we need to change our strategy for this negotiation, he said, turning to me. Mr. Morgan, irrespective of these new findings, we still have a community in the midst of a water emergency. What conditions would you be willing to accept to restore full water access immediately? I had considered this moment with great care. 3 conditions, Mayor. First, the prompt removal of all unapproved infrastructure from my land, to be overseen by county officials. Second, a formal water access agreement that is negotiated in good faith and includes fair market payment for both previous usage and future access. Third, a public apology for the harassment and vandalism my family has suffered. Hayes glanced at Hoffman, who had been in quiet conversation with Richard. Speaking on behalf of the HOA board, Richard at last spoke, creating a clear separation from Cynthia. We can accept those conditions in principle, subject to a review of the particular details. As the meeting drew to a close with a preliminary agreement, Cynthia suddenly sprang to her feet. This is far from over, Morgan, she seethed, all pretense gone. You may believe you've succeeded, but I possess connections you can't even begin to fathom. Savor your win while you can. She exited in a huff, leaving Richard to offer a clumsy apology for her emotional outburst. Dave Wilson quietly let me know that the Water Management Board would be launching its own inquiry into potential breaches of the water code by Clear Hollow. Between the DA investigating fraud allegations and our own regulatory fines, Mistleton is going to be extremely busy, he remarked with a sense of contentment. Keeping my promise, I partially opened the valve that evening, supplying water for 6 hours a day to Clear Hollow while the official agreement was being put together. The community swiftly called an emergency HOA meeting, where Lisa laid out the proof of financial misconduct to the astonished residents. By a landslide vote, Cynthia and Richard were ousted from the board pending the outcome of the investigation, with Lisa taking over as the interim president. When I got back home that night, my mother was on the porch swing, a glass of iced tea waiting for me. Your father would be so proud, was all she said. The conflict was not entirely finished. Cynthia's final threat hinted that she had a final move to make, but for now, justice had triumphed over brute force. This delicate truce held for precisely 9 days. Clear Hollow's new provisional board, under the leadership of Lisa Thompson, was collaborating effectively with our team to create a legitimate water access contract. The unlawful pipeline had been taken apart, and there were plans in motion for a lawful system. The majority of the residents had adapted to the temporary water rationing, seeing it as a necessary measure toward a permanent solution. Even Sheriff Miller was now able to find the time to investigate the vandalism on our property as Cynthia's influence had diminished. Progress was being made on all fronts, which should have been a red flag. Cynthia was not finished. A certified letter arrived. The state's Environmental Protection Agency was launching an investigation into potential contamination of the creek on my property, alleging the presence of industrial chemicals. All water usage was to be stopped until a review was completed. The accusation was founded on samples collected by Thomas Green, the very same inspector who had previously targeted us at Cynthia's behest. My phone was inundated with calls from residents, the media, and Mayor Hayes, all seeking explanations about the contaminated water. The timing was almost too convenient. This is her final play, Sarah stated during our urgent meeting. She aims to create the impression that you deliberately contaminated the water. Olivia pointed out irregularities in the procedure. Anonymous reports do not usually lead to a shutdown without prior verification. Jennifer discovered that Green had a history of disciplinary action for submitting false reports. He has a connection to Cynthia through her former husband's company. This has her fingerprints all over it. We engaged a private firm for testing to gather samples, with a particular focus on the headwaters. We also requested expedited testing from the Maine State Laboratory. Mayor Hayes dispatched a city engineer to witness the process. The findings were available within 48 hours. Our tests indicated that the water was clean at its source and throughout most of the property, with the exception of one area where the creek entered Clear Hollow, which showed minute amounts of the chemicals. Someone deliberately placed that there, Olivia stated after discussing with specialists. These are industrial-grade solvents, not typical runoff. They would have had to be introduced. The proof was compelling enough for Sheriff Miller to take action. With the go-ahead from the county prosecutor, he secured warrants to conduct searches of Green's office and Cynthia's residence. Their discoveries were startling. Green's office yielded falsified reports and a check from Cynthia. Her garage held the precise chemicals that had been used, along with receipts that were dated 3 days prior to the contamination event. The list of charges was long: forgery, fraud, embezzlement, environmental offenses, and conspiracy. Sheriff Miller took Cynthia into custody as she was attempting to escape to Cancun with a suitcase filled with cash. As the legal proceedings advanced, the community started to heal. The newly formed board approved a just water access agreement that acknowledged our rights and included provisions for monitoring and equitable payment. More significantly, the atmosphere of intimidation that Cynthia had fostered was gone. Lisa initiated town hall meetings and made the financial records available for public scrutiny. We obtained a substantial settlement for the years of unauthorized water use and property damage. Rather than keeping the entire amount, I allocated a portion of it to upgrade the ranch's irrigation system and develop a sustainable model that was beneficial to both parties. My mother proposed that we designate a section of the ranch as a nature preserve, complete with educational initiatives, as a memorial to my father's deep affection for the land. He always maintained that we were merely its caretakers, she reminded me. This ensures his legacy continues. In the following months, an unexpected alliance was forged. Some residents, feeling remorse for their previous inaction, came forward to help. Mike Hansen organized volunteer efforts to assist in repairing our land. Jennifer's documented accounts turned into an acclaimed series on the abuse of power by HOAs and the issue of water rights. And for Sarah and me, our professional collaboration evolved into something more profound, built on a foundation of common principles. A year after the valve had been shut, the transformation was remarkable. Clear Hollow had become a beacon of transparency. Our ranch was flourishing with its environmentally friendly enhancements. Cynthia and Green were serving prison sentences. Richard Coleman accepted a plea agreement. The creek now ran unhindered, its flow regulated and honored, providing water to both properties through lawful channels. Even the local tourism authority began to feature our area as a prime example of sustainable resource sharing. On a beautiful autumn evening, I found myself by the creek with my mother, Sarah, Mike, and some former adversaries who had since become friends. We were commemorating the inauguration of the Morgan Water Conservation Trail, a collaborative effort with Clear Hollow. As I observed children playing by the same creek that had once been the source of so much strife, I lifted my beer in a toast. Sometimes, it's necessary to disrupt the flow of water to help people understand its true worth. And ultimately, the most valuable resource isn't the water itself, but the mutual respect we share. The financial settlement would have allowed my return to my tech career in Silicon Valley, but the appeal of spreadsheets had faded. This land, with all its struggles and its splendor, had become my home once more. Dad had always said that the ranch would be here for me when I was prepared for it. He simply neglected to mention that it would require a conflict over water, a fraudulent HOA, and a community revolt. As I watched the sunlight dance on the surface of the creek, now our shared and safeguarded resource, I had a feeling he would have found the irony in it all. Some things hold more significance than we initially realize. And certain conflicts are essential to engage in, not because we seek them out, but because they find us.